Hi, it's Friday afternoon, and this is another extra, because this can't wait till tomorrow or the next day. This is an emergency. This is how we, the U.S. public, has been screwed around and around and around. It's getting to be time where people are getting their second shot. They're supposed to start getting their second shots of the vaccine. So Alex Azar, he's the Health and Human Services Secretary, announced this week that the federal government will begin releasing coronavirus vaccine doses held in reserve for the second shots. Well, no such reserve exists. It never existed, according to state and federal officials briefed on the distribution plans. The Trump administration had already begun shipping out what was available at the end of December, taking second doses directly off the manufacturing line. Nobody knew about that. Now, health officials across the country who had anticipated their extremely limited vaccine supply as much as doubling beginning next week are confronting the reality that their allocations will not immediately increase. Imagine what's that doing to the hopes of those people who are waiting for the second shot, right? That almost totally destroys the eligibility for millions of elderly people and those with high risk medical conditions. So health officials in some states were told of the situation, but there were many that are still in the dark. Now, because these vaccines were two-dose vaccines, the Trump administration's initial policy was to hold back the second dose to protect against the possibility of manufacturing disruptions. But that approach shifted in recent weeks, according to the officials, who spoke on condition of anonymity. You know, anonymity, that means they don't want to be caught telling people stuff that people should have known already, because they weren't authorized to discuss the matter. The result is that next week's allocations will remain flat. They actually stopped the stockpiling of second doses of the Pfizer vaccine at the end of last year. So the last shots held in reserve are for the Moderna supply. The officials said they had confidence in the supply chain and in the speed of production, so they weren't really paying attention. That's what it boiled down to. They weren't paying attention. They probably lost count somewhere after the number 3. This is a monumental fuck up again. They manufacturing the supply chain and the monitoring closely, but they weren't. And they always intended to transition from holding second doses in reserve as the manufacturing supply stabilized, and then we would be ready to flow. There would be a consistent flow of vaccines. And if all of this is confusing, it really is confusing. And of course, in the middle of this are the states that didn't order enough. The average for each state seemed to be about 75% of what they really needed. So we can't blame everything on the Trump administration, because there's 50 other inadequate people running around. So Azar, who knew there was short supply, didn't say anything. He didn't say anything. He continued to signal the states that they would soon see expanded supply. And he urged them to begin vaccinating adults 65 and older, and those under 65 with a high-risk medical condition. And you know what they consider a high-risk medical condition? Smoking. Well, if you want to smoke, you shouldn't be considered high-risk. It's a voluntary thing. You should get at the end of the line for smoking. Anyhow, many states were upset because they didn't want this surge of additional people on their lines, on their waiting lists. That was going to affect their scheduling and their production. They really weren't ready to handle the influx of a couple more million people in all of these places. So now the situation in many states is that they won't have enough vaccines to continue with their plans to meet the obligations in each state. And Oliver Perna, who's the chief operating officer on Operation Warp Speed, told them that it was okay not to include the under 65s in their group if they were having trouble. And all of the states are going to have trouble because they don't know if they're getting enough vaccine They have schedules planned out, mapped out, that they were going to start injecting people on such and such a date, and all of that is down out the window because there's no supply. So is this the way to fight a war? The generals are not prepared. The privates are not prepared. The chief executive is not prepared. That's why we're losing the war. That's why there'll be 500,000 dead people in the United States soon. And I don't know what else to say, and I don't want to say anything really bad about Trump because I've probably said enough bad things about him. But it's not just him. It's the people who he hired that are terrible. They don't know what the hell they're doing. They haven't sat down and figured this whole thing out. And state health officials are upset. Well, maybe if those guys stayed on the ball, they would know what's going on. If they had somebody checking every single day. No, there's plenty of blame to go around. And the American people should be pissed. And the American people should be willing to chip in to bail us all out. And corporations should be willing to chip in and bail us out because there are money problems associated with this too. And we can all chip in by staying safe and wearing a mask. How about that? How about if you don't wear a mask, you don't get a shot, right? If we can prove that you didn't wear a mask, why should we give you a vaccination? Maybe I'm being too tough, but somebody had to be tough and correct in this situation. We put a lot of people's lives at risk. Anyhow, that's it for this extra. 2 rants in one day is enough. Bye. See you in the morning.